Hey everyone, I'm Tara Lynn of Geek Saga Entertainment, and welcome to the Geek Saga Show's new solo podcast series, which I'm calling Impulsive Hyperfocus. Why am I calling it that? Well, it's born of an inside joke about how my personal brand of ADHD manifests itself because when one is diagnosed with ADHD late in life, why not joke about it just a little bit? Okay, in a way I'm kidding because, of course, mental health diagnoses are no joke, but this is me, as raw and unfiltered as I can be, and more often than not, I'm a person who makes jokes when I'm feeling even a bit uncomfortable. And yes, I know that's not uncommon. I'm not thinking I'm super different or special here. But in case you find me interesting enough, I implore you to hit that subscribe button on whatever podcatcher you're listening to. Follow me at A Geek Saga on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and or Twitter. And check out my Patreon at patreon.com/geeksaga_entertainment for early access to these and all other Geek Saga podcast episodes, plus some other patron-only content. Back to the matter at hand, that being, what is this podcast series even about? Well, no episode is going to be the same, though there are likely going to be some themes that carry over here and there. But for this, my very first solo podcast episode ever, I want to talk about one thing: graduations. I'm starting with high school graduations because, well, timing. As of when I'm recording this, my youngest stepkid, who from here on out, at least for this episode, will be referred to as Kiddo, graduated high school just under a week ago. This is momentous for quite a few reasons, but for now, I'm going to try to hyper-focus on this experience versus my own high school graduation, which took place, let's say more than 20, but less than 25 years ago. First, let me say that I am so proud of Kiddo. He was a cum laude student involved in the LGBTQIA plus group at his school and is overall just a generally lovely and trustworthy kid. I don't want to give too many details about him though, because at least for right now, that's not my place. What I want to talk about in this episode are the differences between watching a person graduate in a large suburb in Southern California versus what I experienced in a small farm town in North Central Connecticut. Obviously, both high school and high school graduations in the 2020s are super different from the way they were in the late 90s and early 2000s. First and foremost, Kiddo and his classmates were schooled virtually from just after spring break in 8th grade, I believe, through basically the end of their freshman year, meaning that they didn't go back to school in person until the beginning of their sophomore year. And to be quite honest, I can't say I would have hated missing out on the nonsense I dealt with my freshman year of high school, but let's be real, it's not the same at all, and that's probably a different subject for a different time. Anyway, the whole thing took about 2 hours and 10 minutes. Kiddo's graduating class was nearly 900 people, and the only reason it was that quote-unquote short was because they split the class up by home and visitor sides of the football stadium, and each side could only hear the announcements for the kids who were from their half. So kudos to the school for doing it that way, because wow, it would have been twice as long, obviously, if they had us sit through every single kid's name. But yeah, of course, experiencing this brought me back to my own high school graduation, which was 150-ish people and took place in a U-shaped courtyard that was entirely enclosed by my high school's building. And my parents came, both my sisters came, and my grandparents came. So I want to say everybody got at least 6 tickets. But when your class is only about 150 people, even a small-ish courtyard can fit all those parents and other family members and whatnot. So, And listen, it's been a long time and there is a lot I don't remember about my graduation. But one thing that kept popping into my head while I was sitting through Kiddo's is how at mine, we were not supposed to do a lot of things. Namely, there wasn't supposed to be silly string. I don't remember what, if any, punishment there was for bringing and supposed to be for using silly string, but it was for sure a thing we were told wasn't allowed. Of course, listen, everyone was bringing silly string. Y'all, I don't know what the punishment might have been, if there was one at all, but I was so afraid to get caught that I taped the cans of silly string to my thighs under my dress. And I think this was a bit much because it wasn't like they were searching us, but still, wow, what devotion on my part. Meanwhile, Kiddo was annoyed that he wasn't supposed to have his cell phone with him, which, to be fair, I get it. The vast majority of his ceremony was them reading out hundreds of names, so can't fault him for wanting some form of entertainment. But yeah, he was real annoyed about that. Oh, and there was a sort of similarity between my experience and his, and that was a tradition of handing somebody something. For my part, it's been long enough that I can't recall who we were handing things to. Was it the principal, the superintendent? I don't know. Who knows? Who cares? But it was something stupid, like a penny or a safety pin, maybe a paper clip. Either way, we, once again, were definitely not supposed to do this, but we always did. However, talking to Kiddo after his graduation, it turns out that they were actually given an item, in his case, Mardi Gras beads, to hand to their principal. And of course, Dean and I were immediately like, whoa, we could have given you some kick-ass beads from that time we, actually went to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. But apparently that wouldn't have been allowed, which to me is really lame. But also, I have so many questions because Kiddo insists that the principals keep these collections. But who the hell wants to keep nearly 900 strings of plain bulk Mardi Gras beads? And where would one keep them? Am I right to assume that at best the principal will keep a handful and the rest will get thrown out? This particular principal, this was his first graduating class, so maybe he's still figuring this out or what, but I have a feeling that has to be wrong. There's no way these past principals kept all several hundred to close to 1,000 items they were handed at all of the graduations they presided over, but whatever. Speaking of questions that I have, and because I'm on the subject of graduations already anyway, when did kids start getting graduation ceremonies for like so many grades? For instance, when did kindergarten graduations become a thing? In my day, we went to kindergarten for half a day, AM or PM. I was PM, by the way, which was so obviously the cooler kindergarten period. I say, although I'm fairly certain whether one went to AM or PM was a totally arbitrary school system decision. I don't know what the kindergarten situation is nowadays, and my sister informed me that my youngest nibbling went for 6 hours a day, 5 days a week this year. But really, y'all, here's a whole ass graduation ceremony for your kid going to school for 1 year. I'm not saying that it isn't important to celebrate life accomplishments, but considering the fact that I'm supposedly technically a millennial, the generation that has been heralded as the trash heap of kids who were given awards for nothing, how is it we weren't celebrate for, quote, graduating, unquote, every little thing? Kindergarten? Really? And I've also seen 5th grade and middle school graduations. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being schneh because I'm childless in the sense that I did not birth or even adopt my own children and watch them or even either of my stepkids go through all the grades and the graduations that now apparently come with a bunch of them these days. And I promise that despite my questioning what seems like an excessive number of graduation ceremonies, I do still love seeing my friends' photos of their kids' kindergarten and whatever else graduations. I really do. I love seeing them. I just am very curious as to when all these extra graduations became a thing and why, honestly. And that has led me to have this sort of, I'm sorry, but what are we celebrating here mindset? Though I'll certainly admit that my opinion on this probably doesn't count, or at least shouldn't. I got lucky. My partner, Dean, who is an amazing dad, raised 2 really great kids, and I got to slide into a situation where one was already an adult and the other was 13, which means I had to do very little. When it comes to kiddo, I basically got to sit across the desk from him his first year of high school. And honestly, this was great for us because coming in as not a legal step parent at that point, someone who'd only met the kids a few times, having that I think half or not quite half a school year where I was out in California and he was still doing school virtually, led to him becoming as much a best friend as a stepkid. So that was really cool. And then once he was going to school in person, I got to drive him to school almost every school day that I've been in California. I got to watch him grow as a person. And, then I got to see him graduate high school last week with AP honors. But again, I didn't have to do much. And while there have certainly been some serious conversations about his future, not all of which were entirely pleasant, I can promise that basically all of any unpleasantness that occurred was not due to Dean or I, and certainly not us trying to press our desires or any, so-called societal expectations for his future on him. Because I do remember how kind of at and just after my high school graduation, I felt absolutely lost. I was made to feel like higher education was my only choice, which is how the vast majority of my generation was made to feel, let's be honest. And luckily, I had a full scholarship to a small liberal arts college about 30 minutes from where I grew up. But I only chose that school because when the time came to make the decision about where to go, I had a bit of a panic about leaving my family, my friends, the comforts of home, the usual shit. Although, to be honest, I also didn't want to move away from my high school boyfriend, who, of course, broke up with me about a month after I chose that school, which was about a month before I graduated. Anyway, I ended up regretting the first college choice I made, though thankfully I don't regret most of my future decisions that led to my leaving that school and eventually moving on to another one that was a much better fit for me. Point being, I never wanted kiddo to feel that way, to feel like he didn't have a choice. And while he is almost certainly going to college, it's not because he feels like he has no other choice. Unlike, again, most of my generation who were made to feel like higher education was their only choice, regardless of whether or not continuing on with school was something a person truly wanted to do or how much debt they might accrue. And again, I was really lucky. I had that full scholarship, at least for the first school I went to. And then also, luckily, I chose a much cheaper school for my second one. But that's not how life usually works for most people. And in the end, it didn't really work for me either. Because again, regretted that first college choice. And while I did not regret the second and luckily did not come out with a ton of debt, which I completely recognize my privilege in that, especially. I have never once actually used my college degree. But that's a different story for another time. And I want to end this with one more comparison and a follow-up question for anyone listening. Because one thing I noticed was that they did play some songs after kiddo's official graduation ceremony ended, but they didn't have a class song performance like I did. And I'm using the term class song and the word performance kind of lightly because if I'm remembering correctly, while we did technically hold a vote to choose our class song, it was pretty much known that the class leadership had their song choice in mind prior to the voting period. So it was democracy at work in that, sure, there was a vote, but from what I recall, the so-called popular kids absolutely made it known that everyone really should just vote for Small Town by John Mellencamp, which, yes, was the song we ended up singing along to during our ceremony. So that's why performance is being used lightly, because they played the song and I'm pretty sure we sang along with the lyrics. I don't think there was even a karaoke version or anything like that. If I'm remembering correctly, but fairly certain they weren't about to go search out some sort of karaoke situation just so we could sing along to the music or whatever. Now, if you've never heard the song Small Town by John Mellencamp, you're not missing much, in my opinion. It's like Well, I was born in a small town, and I live in a small town. Probably die in a small town. Oh, those small communities. Yeah, it goes on. My friends are small town. My parents live in the small town. My job is small town. Doesn't give me much opportunity. He marries an LA doll, brings her to his small town, and now she's small town too. Yeah. Listen, and then in the end, he says he's going to die in a small town, which, okay, dark. But in Mellencamp's own words, it's a song about growing up in a small town and not wanting or needing to leave it to really live your life. And hey, if someone else feels that way, more power to you. But despite the fact that I didn't wander too far from home for my freshman year of college, I knew that eventually, and hopefully sooner rather than later, I would leave and never go back. Or, well, to specify, never go back permanently. So personally, I felt like this song choice and the fact that it was the popular crowd that insisted upon it. Come on. If you're one of those big fish in a small pond, it's not surprising that you think your regular dirt road and or cornfield parties with your several dozen high school besties were the epitome of great life experiences, especially when you're 17 or 18 and that's basically all you know. Anyway, listen, I'm not saying that I didn't have some great times growing up in a small town. The further removed I am from my childhood, the more I appreciate about it. And a lot of my appreciation centers around that small town life. But damn right, I'm still glad I left. And I still don't really understand why anyone would want to remain in their hometown their entire lives, especially if it was one like mine. I will surely have way more to say about my small town childhood and teenage years in the future. But for now, what I want to know from you guys is, did you have a class song that was played or performed somehow as part of your graduation ceremony? And whether you had a class song or not, did you go to a large or small high school? So yeah, I went to a small school. We had a class song. I went to a large school. We had a class song too. Maybe this is a thing that went away, not long after I graduated. I don't know. But shoot me a PM on social media or email geeksaga@gmail.com and let me know. Anyway, so kiddo's graduation ceremony was about 2 hours of my life that I'll never get back. But it doesn't matter because he's my kiddo and I love him. And yeah, it was worth being there in person and getting to hear his name called and see him accept that diploma. And on that note, welcome to the end of my first ever solo rant podcast. Before I close out, I just want to give a shout out to our Heroes Tier patron, Tommy of the TKOK Podcast Network. Thank you so much to Tommy for his longtime support of Geek Saga Entertainment. To my other listeners, thank you for sticking this out to the end, and I hope you'll tune in for future Impulsive Hyperfocused episodes. I already have quite a few subjects that I want to touch on, and the personal stories and insights to go with them, of course. That said, if you have any thoughts on stories of mine you're interested in hearing or any particular rants or rambles you'd like me to go on, send me a DM at A Geek Saga on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, or Twitter, or again, email ageeksaga@gmail.com. Also, definitely follow me on social media for the most current news and updates about this series and other Geek Saga endeavors. And please consider backing our Patreon at patreon.com/geeksaga_entertainment for early access to these episodes and other perks.